Please come to order. First item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda, and I'd like to propose one amendment there. We'd like to go into closed session after audience response for discussion on the Telosco case with Attorney Everett Thompson. That would be under Code IAWGS 143-318-11. This is, so everyone knows, it's a different attorney because of certain conflicts that Attorney Thompson is handling this case for us. Do I have a motion for adoption of the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? None. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. There being none, so ordered. At this time, we'll have a time for audience response. Any item that's not on the agenda, or that's on the agenda where there will not be public comments, can be made at this time. We will ask if you would please hold your comments to 5 minutes. Is anybody like to speak to the board this evening? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, you heard from me last time. Just had one more thing to say. The main reason I was trying to get, I'm from OBX Jetpack.
I'll get you to state your name if you would, so we'll have it for the record.
Stone, OBX Jetpack. Yes. Anyway, the main reason I was trying to get this thing done was for Memorial Day. There's a new group out there called Mobility May, and they're a division out of the Wounded Warriors. So what I was doing, I was trying to pick the best spot on the Outer Banks that I could fly the Wounded Warriors. The best spot that I could find was Nags Head Water Sports, across from Bass Nights. The reason being is because I could take them out of a wheelchair into a beach wheelchair, put them in the beach wheelchair, roll them out in the water, and then set them from that right on the jetpack and go out. They could walk out. We could get them out just far enough, and we had plenty of water right there. If we go out further, there's no water. There's plenty of water right there at the very end. It's like 10 foot deep, 6 foot deep, and so on. And it's a perfect spot. So that was the main reason I was trying to get the zoning for them. I ended up flying them in Manio, where we had to, because y'all didn't allow it, Manio let me fly the Wounded Warriors there. And what we did, we had to bring them onto the pier. We had to set them on the pier, set them down on the pier, and then grab them from there, put them in, an extra turn to get them out in the water. It was a safe spot, and I was hoping that because of the response from this thing, we flew 3 Wounded Warriors from Paris. It's Paralyzed Veterans of America is what they were. And the last one, I've got to tell you, he was sitting right beside me. He was watching the other 3 fly. And he looked at me and he says, I've got to tell you, when I got in this wheelchair, he said, I figured I wouldn't have any more fun ever again. He says, I'm getting ready to fly a freaking jetpack. How cool is that? And anyway, he did real well with it, and we didn't hurt anybody. We did everything. So this year, they've already gotten a big response on this thing where the Paralyzed American, they want to do it again, and she wants to let me do it 3 days this time in May. And this would be really good for Nags Head if I could fly him at, in fact, I haven't talked to him yet to see if he would even let me. They get the new owner, but if we could fly it there, this is a real nice safe spot. If I go out 600 feet, I will not have enough water to fly them, and plus you can't take people in wheelchairs, on a boat or whatever. But that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
All right, so, thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we'll declare audience response closed. This time, I'd like to make a motion that we go into closed session for discussion of the Telosco case with our attorney, Everett Thompson, and that would be under GS 143-318-11, subchapter A3. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, we'll return in a few minutes. Nags Head Board of Commissioners back in open session. We did discuss the Telosco case with our attorneys and have given them instructions as to how to continue forward. Next item on the agenda is a consideration of conditional use site plan request submitted by Albemarle Associates and VHB Engineering for the Outer Banks event site. And since we've received some additional information since our last public hearing, I'd like to reopen the public hearing on that for a few minutes. And I'll ask Ben if he would handle that for us.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll be glad to. Going to reopen the public hearing for the conditional use permit site plan request submitted by Albemarle Associates and VHB Engineering for the Outer Banks event site located at 6800 South Croatan Highway. There was a public hearing previously held on this on September 3rd. There have been some various documents, I believe, presented to the board that need to be introduced, and if someone who would be willing to discuss those as part of the applicant's presentation will be sworn, then we could have evidence on that. And I don't know that there is a staff discussion item here that anybody's going to testify to. So if one of the applicant representative wants to discuss the specific items of documentary evidence that were brought forward, that would be wonderful at this time.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris DeWitt. I'm with VHB here with Albemarle Associates and Lee Nettles as well from the Outer Banks Visitors Bureau. As was mentioned, the initial public hearing for the site plan for the Outer Banks event site was held on September 3rd. There were a couple of questions at that time. In response to those questions, we submitted a revised landscape sheet. That's really a couple of sheets that comprise the landscaping plan, I should say. There's more than one sheet in the site plan. That's really the only additional piece of information that was added to the site plan was the revised landscaping plans to show the buffer, the landscape buffer along the southern property line of the Outer Banks event site. And we'll be happy to answer any questions. I know Lee may want to make a couple of remarks, but that, in terms of entering evidence, that was the only additional information that was submitted.
Does anybody on the board have any questions?
I think I've got a couple. I've had a concern from one of the adjacent property owners about keeping all of the storm water on site. And it looks like you've done that except in one area, which is down at BMP HC. It looks like that overflows into the marsh area. The possibility it might get off site because there's a lot of water coming that way.
We have really contained all the water on site. Those BMPs may have some emergency overflow that I don't have the plan in front of me. I'm not sure exactly which one you're talking about, but we ran calculations to meet both the town's and the state's stormwater requirements. We've actually received the state permit from Diener just yesterday for the stormwater plan.
Bottom elevation of that, this is in the southwest corner. Bottom elevation is elevation of 2, and adjacent to that we've got a 1.9, and then sloping on off from that. And it doesn't look like you've got an area that there's a wooden walkway across part of it that doesn't look like it's not a diked area, where you can have an overflow out of that area into the adjacent, which would flow into the adjacent property, which just happens to be town property, but the concern was from another landowner down there. So I'd like for you to take a look at that.
I can take a look at that, but I do think we've got everything contained on site, but I'll follow up and take a look at that.
Then we wanted to minimize the fill on this area, and I noticed you've got a couple of landscaped areas that are filled to the 10-foot elevation and the 9-foot elevation. These are on the northeast corner. Would like to see less fill, not any fill that's not necessary, and that doesn't, from your drawings, doesn't appear necessary. But I know it would be from a landscape architecture's standpoint might look good, but it's
There's a little landscape berm right there that I believe you're talking about that does get to those elevations. We had to elevate the front of the site, the portion of the site on the highway, as you know, to get the driveway up to roadway level.
Got two there. That landscaped elevation's at 10, and then the little knoll next to it,
Right
just
there.
west of it, there is at a 9 elevation.
Right. We also had to get elevations here up to get the restroom building up above base flood elevation. And we did, you're right, those two are mainly to provide some landscape interest. Those could be looked at. We could reduce some of the fill there. And those elements, the final elevation of those elements are not proposed as part of phase 1 construction.
Yeah, they don't look like they have any structural reason for being there, but
Right.
and I can understand it from a landscape standpoint, but we
Right.
don't want any more fill on that lot than we absolutely has to be put on there. Thing that some other folks are looking at down there. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Marvin?
Sir, one of the primary interests of the public from the public meetings, as I'm sure you'll recall, is what became known as the view shed from the bypass, being able to see the sound as you drive down the highway. I think the whole layout is great. I'm very much in favor of everything here. But as I looked at the landscape charts that you gave us and see that we're planting over 70 live oaks in the overall area. And I look at the sheet and kind of color them in, and from what I can determine, these live oaks may grow anywhere from 40 to more than that feet high with a very wide spread, evergreen, so that they're year-round, blocking the view. It seems like once those mature and as they're growing up, the view shed is really going to be interrupted. I'd like to know what your view is of that.
We took a pretty careful look at that, and actually in working through the public meetings and working with the tourism board, went through a couple of iterations on the landscaping plan. And the idea with the trees, I know, could you go back to that? Right there, that's perfect. So in developing the landscaping plan, we were looking at a number of things. One, we needed to meet town requirements for our landscaping. We wanted to focus on species that would thrive on the site. We wanted to preserve those views, and then there's some of the landscaping that is included in the stormwater infiltration basins. So those are really the things that kind of guided the landscaping plan. And I know, 70 trees may sound like a lot. It's a large site. We tried to minimize to the extent we could the number of large trees, providing some framed views. So, what you've got there now is kind of an unobscured open view. The proposed landscaping we've put in and designed so as not to block the views, but to provide some framed views of the sound, and also help us start to define the event spaces and the drive aisles and the pedestrian ways, as well as provide some shade. So that's really the thinking behind the trees, and we do believe that we've got the landscaping designed in such a way that it would not block the views, that it would maintain the views, provide some framed views, that some of those trees could be limbed up so that the eye height views would not be blocked, and the views from the bypass, you would have framed views of the sound through the site.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, that's a pretty good depiction right there. If you look at what appears to be pretty much to scale representation of the size of those trees. If you're on the highway and you're trying to look from the highway to the sound, there are not many places where it looks like you could see through. Now, these are going to be fairly short when they're planted, correct? And it's going to be quite a few years as they grow up. So it'll be quite some time before they could be limbed up to a level where they could be, you could have a view under the limbs. And I'm not sure, I guess the whole maintenance idea of who's going to take care of the area afterwards, and the workload of limbing those up properly and keeping them trimmed properly would be high. Are there any other options to preserving more of that view shed?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I mean, I guess we could try to limit the number of trees further. We did, again, go through some various iterations and end up cutting the overall number of trees down. There is a baseline requirement we've got to meet. And there, it was a bit of a balancing act in trying to provide shade and trying to provide some of the space definition that we need, and in trying to frame some of those views. Balancing that with keeping the views open was a little bit of an iterative process that we went through. And we think this plan achieves those goals. But I understand your concern.
Thank you.
Any other question?
I
I had one. If you
Go ahead.
if y'all- And this might be more addressed to staff. We on page 2.2 grading and drainage plans, we're showing pervious asphalt. I thought we had moved away from that and only approved pervious concrete.
We will be using pervious concrete. If that says pervious asphalt, it should be pervious concrete.
Pervious concrete,
Yes.
okay. I just wanted to make sure, because
Correct.
we don't allow pervious asphalt anymore.
Lee, did you want to?
My turn?
Your turn.
On the front of this thing, the main building is shown to be 35 foot high, but on A201, it's 37.6. And the tensile thing on the front is shown as 14.5, but in the drawings, it's 20 foot.
That's the second one is an elevation. If you look, coming from base flood, that's coming from base flood elevation.
Is that it?
It's 35.
Okay?
I went through that same iteration last night.
The front says this is 18,000 square feet, but if I go back to the drawing, there's about 10 in that building. Is that little dotted line to the west of the building, is that like an expansion or something?
That's a potential future expansion.
Okay, what does that do? What is the 1,000 people based on?
The initial
So we're adding another 1,000 people,
potentially.
and the restrooms for them?
The restrooms would have to be part of the expansion. The restrooms that are shown are for the initial phase of the construction. There would be, if the expansion were done, additional restrooms would be installed as part of that expansion.
One more question. On L 1.0, which is the landscape, the new landscape plan, I see that there is a buffer, a side buffer on the south side, but there's 3 gaps in that buffer. What's the purpose of these gaps?
First of all, we wanted to cluster some of the landscaping rather than just spread it evenly along the southern property line. Second of all, we wanted to provide some flexibility of access between the two sites.
Okay. Just heard that answer. I thought it was fairly clear last time we were in here that I was against access to that side, but I guess it didn't count. That's, I think, and I will tell you that 1,000 people, whatever happened to a nice open site with maybe some parking and something better than a pole barn, but 1,000 people in this building with a 45-foot tower that adds nothing to anything?
35-foot tower.
No, the tower says 45 foot. The roof is 35 to the house, and the tower's above it. It's 45-foot tower that adds nothing, doesn't even give architectural points. So the architectural points were all gained by the porches to this huge building. I think we've lost our way on this thing somewhere. This is looking like a Jeanette's Pier project. That's all my comments.
I had one more question, and that was on the phasing and what's included in each phase.
Included in phase 1.
Right.
Could you go down several slides, please? Further? A little further? A little further? That one with the red on it. So phase 1 includes everything that's encircled here. In this dark red in the center, it would include finished construction, final grading, stormwater, landscaping, lighting, the tensile structure, the turn lane, this parking here, the walkways and landscaping, essentially finished site construction of everything here. In the northern portion of the site, we would be doing grading, installing utilities and the geogrid for the lawns, basically getting the north portion of the site graded and to a finished level so that it could be used for events, used during the season, used for the seafood festival, but not doing the pavilion, the new driveway, the walkways, and the finished amenities of the northern portion of the site.
When does the second phase of the parking come in? It's
This portion down here
right, yes.
is a phase 3 item.
That's not going to be done the same time the pavilion's going to be done?
Not as currently planned.
I think I would object to that. I think you're going to need that parking when you bring the pavilion in, because you haven't got much on-site parking until you get that.
We can go ahead. Yeah, again, I understand that concern. You know, we're providing the parking here, obviously getting rid of the parking here, but these spaces can be used as overflow parking even before this gets built. Particularly this will have the geogrid in it and is intended to be used as potential overflow parking if needed.
Is that geogrid incorporated in the entire space or into the blocks that were shown on the drawings?
It's a grid, basically like a street grid.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's not contiguous.
Correct.
It's just a cross pattern in there. Yes, Commissioner Code.
This is a conditional use site plan, and it's being done in phases. The mayor has expressed some concern about fill. Given that new flood maps are due out to us, should have been sooner rather than later, but may change the BFEs of the property. How much will that change the proposed fill if the BFE, say, goes up 2 feet? Does that mean you're going to add another 2 feet of fill?
The only place that would come into play is that this space right here, the enclosed space, the restroom and the admin, have to be up above that elevation. So there could be some additional fill or additional building work to meet that, but the rest of the site could be graded as is.
If you've just gotten your permit for stormwater management from the state, and it's based on this plan right here, if you add more fill to the property, does that not change your stormwater calculations?
We would need to rerun those calculations.
So theoretically, Mayor, it could change those things that you're concerned about how it flows to the south and impact. Because everything in that area pretty much goes north to south. So I was just concerned about what adding possibly more fill on a new flood map would do to the surrounding properties. If you've already calculated everything for your
Well,
basins based on the current.
Yeah, again, if that happened and we had to rerun the storm calculations, we would have to regrade, we would have to rework the storm system so that we were containing on site as we are doing now.
So you would have to change all your vegetation and change out a lot of that
It's just,
stuff.
you know, hard to say
I
exactly
mean, I'm just trying to find.
what might. Yeah, we'd have to come, yeah. Sure.
Hi, I'm John
Hi, John.
DeLucia from Alpine Associates, and I won't talk very long, I promise. You know, early on, some of the viewscapes are very important for the site, obviously. The highway's at about a 10-foot elevation, 10 and a half, somewhere in that range there. The actual pavilion was set to be lower than base flood elevation, and water can run through it. We've seen the water run up to about 7.5, 8 feet. It hasn't come across the bypass in
It's
any.
come close.
It's come close.
It's come pretty close.
I've seen it up
So
close.
the
like
floor of the building
year
of the
ago.
pavilion has actually been put above that elevation, that we've seen it. It's a little bit higher than the bypass.
Okay.
The bathrooms are elevated a couple feet above that. That's how Ben designed them when he designed the building. And if we had to raise, I mean, what Chris is saying, and I don't think that grading would change on the site necessarily. It may just be that we have to raise the bathroom structure another foot. Although we've heard that some of these flood zones are potentially coming down. Hopefully.
Some of them are.
Yeah, hopefully. And you're right, I haven't seen them yet either, so we don't know what's going to happen there. But I don't think there would be any more fill put on the site. I really don't. I think that we would have to modify architecturally and internally. And if we had to put some more fill on the site, then obviously we'd need to come back and talk to y'all.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anything further from the applicant?
Hi, Lee Nettles with the Visitors Bureau. It's good to see you all again. Thanks for having us. I just wanted to kind of back up a little bit. We jumped right into the technical aspects of the project, but I just wanted to back up a little bit and first of all say that obviously the project stands to benefit everyone for many years to come, not only driving overnight visitation during the less than peak seasons, but also producing economic development and importantly, giving residents and visitors fun things to do, great activities, and to enjoy their experience in Nags Head. It's been referenced that that the pavilion it would hold about 1,000 people or so. The plan to expand, or at least consider, if you were to expand, how would that happen? We were encouraged to do that at the mayor's request. Actually, coming out of one of the public hearings that we had a couple of public hearings throughout the process. So it's not necessarily that we intend to build that expansion, but it did make good sense to at least consider now where we are. If you were to do it, how would you do it before it's there and then you're in a corner? One of the other aspects that I'd like to speak to, if I could, is the issue of phasing the project. That's a practical matter, just driven out of the fact that the tourism board is assuming that we're the sole funder of the project, and that's fine. We have a dedicated revenue stream or a dedicated line item for that funding. Certainly, we'd like to accomplish the project quicker, but it was equally important to us that we maximize the functionality of the space. That, in other words, it's an event site. We want to be able to use it as an event site as much as we possibly can. So, for instance, the construction for Phase 1 is expected to take place from December through March. That's well after the Seafood Festival, October 18th, I'm sorry, shameless plug, and well before the events that we're already talking about having on the site in April and May. It would be our intention to do that with the other phases as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Nettles?
Yes, I do. Lee, obviously you were all the public hearings and everything. What's your view of the public perception of the view shed and what these trees would do, and how would it be received in your opinion?
Well, my first experience with the public hearings came about when we were considering the economic feasibility of a hotel and a conference center on the site. And certainly when I think of where we are now with the site's use dedicated to events, which benefit both the residents and visitors, and the fact that we're preserving sound access throughout the project and throughout its life. And I do believe that we will have visibility of the sound. To me, it invites the person to come onto the site and to use it as a green space, as an open space, as an event site. So I think that there's value in having a little bit of a reveal. I think it's going to essentially remain a beautiful site, and it'll have a lot of functionality and a lot of use for a broad range of people. So, one thing that I learned with the public hearings is it's probably impossible to please everybody. The pavilion is a great example of that. We had practically just as many people asking for a larger enclosed structure as we did ask for nothing at all. So what we have is a glass door pavilion that has the ability to be open air. And so we're trying to find compromise and strike the best balance with all these things. So it will impede the view somewhat, but I think trees are nice too, and I think that the use and the interaction with the site is going to be outstanding. So the sound is totally revealed when you're on the site, and that's what we want to encourage.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr.
Yeah,
Nettles?
Lee, I'm still concerned about the south buffer. It appears to be an insistence. The initial plan that came in had no buffer at all. Now we come in with two 10-foot and one 22-foot holes with the "we want to preserve access" thing. Are you guys just kind of want to be able to drive in and out of the Harvey Sound access and that?
We're not integrating that into the planning for every event that would happen out there. I think that it's beneficial to at least allow the option.
Okay, just for the record, in the first seafood festival, my AAR said, don't ever do this again. I went to the same public hearings, I said the same thing. So that is not a good idea. It never has been. And that's the town property and the Miller Restaurant. That's actually, I think, the Miller Restaurant's driveway, not even ours. So the idea that you're trying, leave this open so that you can drive in and out of there doesn't sit well.
Anyone else have any further questions? Ms. Walters?
May I ask a fellow commissioner a question?
Okay.
AAR,
After action report from that I turned into the chairman of the first seafood festival.
but that wasn't an overall opinion of everyone. That was your after action.
Yes,
Correct.
my
Okay.
opinion of using the
Okay.
Harvey Sound access as a transportation input, egress and all
Okay.
was in there specifically.
I think one thing that's held true with each iteration of the Seafood Festival, and I've been involved in the planning of each of the three, we've tried to acknowledge what's worked and what hasn't, and we've made changes each year. This festival will utilize a different site layout than the other two previously. I think if nothing else, that should show our willingness to try and improve the festival experience and to be conscious of the impact on the surrounding areas.
I wasn't talking about the seafood festivals, I was talking about the buffer with holes in it that somebody could be using. If not the seafood festival, somebody else. There's no holes in the northern buffer for clustering reasons or whatever else, just in the south. And everybody's dancing around the subject of wanting to use the Harvey Sound access as a road into there, and not a good idea, my opinion.
We do have, further to that, we do have ordinances which allow shared parking with agreements between the two parties to have shared parking. So if you have holes in the buffer for shared parking, it could be addressed by an agreement for shared parking.
Do you mean holes for people to walk through from shared parking or vehicles to drive
If
through?
you're planning on shared parking, then you need an agreement. Yes, Commissioner Allen?
But the agreement for shared parking could only be with the town of Nags Head because we're the adjoining property owner. It couldn't be with Miller's Restaurant that's going to be suffering from having all their parking taken because there's an entrance or exit.
Right.
Granted, people can use the Harvey site and go to the event site anyway, or they could use Miller's, unless Miller so ropes it off. Back when the Harvey site was developed, it was a really good working relationship between the town and Miller's to get a shared driveway and instead of two curb cuts so close together. But in order, I guess my question is going to be, is it possible to have a pedestrian shared access rather than a car shared access with the Harvey site, which would negate some of these concerns possibly out there?
Yes. We had a meeting with Cliff and Andy last week, I think. And we talked about the buffer and, whether it should be solid or whether it should be split rail fence or and I think not having a solid wall, John, is a better thing to do. I understand your concern about vehicular access. I think pedestrian access is a good idea, and maybe the inclusion of some split rail fence with a 4-foot wide opening where people can walk through but you couldn't get a car through would be a good compromise, if would be something.
I have no problem with pedestrians, they're gonna run back and forth, but one of those is a 22-foot gap. That's over a 2-lane road, trucks and everything. And it's ideal position to go right through there.
Yes.
I'd kind of like to look longer term and not, they say fences make good neighbors. And, there was no buffer placed on our site. I'll just bring that up. I could also see the potential for an event, something occurs, and your fire or your rescue or somebody else may need to come in from that end because, I think it's beneficial to leave those gaps for the future because we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. I don't see any harm in having the gaps and having the trees. If you want to put up a split rail fence, if you want to leave a fence with a 4-foot gap, but I think just for the ability of access for anyone, in the future or, hazardous
through the
or
dairy
event or whatever, I think it's beneficial to leave that opening. We have access at the other end, where they could access that way and get onto the site, but if there's something that happens down at this end, it would be beneficial to have
If it's
some
that
kind of access.
beneficial, it could put in a little access road at the south end.
an
Go right to
access
the
road
parking
beside
lot there,
a
right to the
parking
parking lot there.
doesn't make sense. But,
Go back to the public hearing, we'll have a discussion later.
okay.
Are there any further questions? Anything further from the applicant, Mr. Nettles?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
The public hearing's now closed, and it's back with the board to make a decision on issuing the conditional use permit and site plan, or denying it, or modifying it and potentially adding conditions. You'll see in your packet there are multiple findings you have to make to approve the conditional use permit. Mr. Mayor, it's back with you.
Hey, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
How many slides were there to present as part of this?
How many? 12.
Could we
still-
see them?
Could
We
we
haven't
see all-
seen them.
could
I
we
mean,
see
I
all-
thought we were having a
Presentation.
presentation.
We reopened the public hearing and went straight into details.
Right.
Would you, if we're going to discuss it again, would you like to reopen it one more time so that we can have a presentation, or would you prefer just to go through the slides yourself?
I think we'll just go through the slides the way they are. I think we're in good enough shape. Unless there's a legal problem.
If you're going to take additional testimony or comment, I would recommend opening the public hearing.
Let's reopen it then.
I'll reopen the public hearing that was open previously, and if it's Commissioner Cahoon's, would you like him to provide a presentation now, or do you have questions?
I'm sorry, I was just under the impression that Mr. Nettles was going to give us a presentation of the site and your vision for it and so forth. Maybe I was wrong.
I was prepared to give that talk, and then we kind of put it around the public hearing and jumped into specific issues, but I'm happy to share my thoughts on the vision.
Yeah, we'd like to have those.
Well, I kind of made some of the points in my comments that I hoped to, but I just wanted to kind of provide some context for the site plan review and for that discussion, and it has been a process, really, beginning with that consideration of what originally the site was purchased for a multi-use facility, and subsequently led to a hotel and a conference center consideration and public process, and ultimately led the tourism board and then our work with staff and with the Board of Commissioners to kind of recognize the benefit and the strength of dedicating that site's use to an event site. And as I mentioned, the fact that it benefits both visitors as well as residents, I think is extremely important. I'm appreciative and thankful for all the work that staff has done and the support that this board's given, and in particular the planning board in its work with VHB and with Albemarle and Associates. I realize it's quite a project. It's got a lot of moving parts to it. The tourism board, just for your information, in August approved the phase one as presented and committed to the funding that was associated with that. Based on your input at this site plan review, we'll go from there and potentially bid out the project and ultimately go before the board with specific bids, and then ultimately to the county commissioners for their consent on those expenditures. As I mentioned, it is approached as a phased plan, and that's simply a practical matter of the funds that are available. But that said, importantly, each of the phases were designed to stand alone and to offer additional benefit to the property's use as an event site. And as I mentioned, it was really important to us that we maximize the use of that site. I haven't been in the weeds or living with the details to the same extent that these fellas have with stormwater and all the ins and outs of it. I come at it more from the perspective of the benefit for just really lining up economic development, tourism development, activities for residents and for visitors, and just ultimately the work that the Visitors Bureau does is to contribute to quality of life through defraying taxes and providing activities and keeping businesses open and prosperous. And I believe that this event site and the approach that we're offering finds that appropriate balance, the best balance that's available. And we're really excited about the project. I understand that it's an important step, but we would certainly welcome your support and any questions and concerns that you have. I'm happy to address them as best I can. Chris is. If I can, Chris would like to take you through some of the process steps that have been taken recently and kind of what the next steps are, and offer some visuals to go along.
Thanks, Lee. So we did put together just a couple of slides here for you that I can go through very quickly to describe the process we've been through, look at some of the design details, talk about phase one, and then talk next steps. We've already hit on some of these slides, so I'll be brief, but stop me if you have any questions, please. Next slide, please. So just the process that we've been through with the review. We did the tech review and the planning board in July. Obviously started this public hearing a couple weeks ago with you, and are here hoping for the conditional site plan approval this evening. Next slide. In addition to town approvals, as you know, there are several other agency approvals that we need for erosion and sediment control, stormwater, sewage disposal, CAMA and DOT approvals. We have all of these in hand. The final agreement with DOT is pending. We have all of the others in hand. We have resolution with DOT that they're ready to move forward, but the final agreement is pending. But otherwise, we have all of these elements completed. Next slide. Very quickly, again, we've been through some of this, but see if I can get the laser to work. We've got the bypass out here and the sound over here. This is the location of the existing access to the site with the existing parking roughly in this vicinity. So we'd be making improvements to the access drive, a turnaround here with the tensile welcome structure at this location, parking here and here with some potential grass pave overflow parking in this vicinity, pedestrian walkways throughout the site, and really formalizing 3 primary event lawns of various sizes. That space would allow large events like the Seafood Festival, but would also accommodate smaller events in more well-defined spaces. on the site. The stormwater management relies on biofiltration that is primarily here in the center of the site. Most of that will be constructed in phase one. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. Secondary access to the north with the pavilion structure shown here, the open pavilion with the enclosed restrooms and admin space here, and then boardwalk feature along the sound intended to connect to the potential future town boardwalk along the sound as well. Next slide, please.
Do you mind?
Please.
Do you mind going back one, if I may? Is this a bus drop off or vehicle drop off?
There's a turn lane there into the site and a bus drop off, and the bus drop off would be at that location there, and there's a little plaza there for folks to get in and out of the buses.
And if that were in place for an event such as a seafood festival, that would take away the need to egress through the Harvey site.
Potentially, yeah.
And that you tried to do that, but I know in order to shut down a lane, you'd have to essentially close business.
The buffer would have impacted several businesses leading up. It just wasn't feasible.
When does that happen?
Phase one.
Okay.
The turn lane and the bus turn are phase one elements.
May I ask a question?
Please.
The narrative actually is very helpful. Thank you very much. The boardwalk is phase, I guess mine didn't reach that far. The boardwalk is phase one.
Phase four.
Phase four. Okay. Where does I see how the boardwalk goes. Where does the boardwalk go along the rest of your property to connect on a southern boundary?
Yeah, right here, this would be, the boardwalk would connect to an at-grade walkway that would then connect to the boardwalk as it came through here.
Okay.
And, you know, right now, we just don't know exactly where those are coming in, so there's some flexibility built in there.
So you're not planning a boardwalk, you're planning an aggregate walkway
Right.
as a section?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. So, you know, just in terms of managing stormwater, trying to minimize hard cover on the site, we incorporated as much green space as possible. We are using pervious concrete, not pervious asphalt, and some of the overflow parking is a grass paver type situation. But you can see the pervious concrete sidewalks, very, very effective and useful, and can also incorporate some scoring patterns and some architectural interest into those walkways as well. Next slide. We kind of hit on the landscaping to meet town requirements, selecting species that would work on the site, preserving those views, and doing the landscaping that we needed to in the infiltration basins. That's an example of the type of basin that would be proposed in some of these areas, just a similar example from another site.
If I could ask a quick question on that to follow up. You mentioned that some of this landscaping, particularly the trees, are there to meet some of the landscaping requirements of the town. Could we reduce any of those trees and still meet the requirements?
I don't know off the top of my head. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry.
Please.
And talking about the landscape, and on this south side, that, you know, one of the things the board was discussing is that that's a condition that the board can place. I mean, as to what amount, what degree of vegetation or buffering there is. The direction I think you heard pretty clearly was that the Harvey site could not be incorporated as the overall site plan of the event site. And because there were some drawings early on that showed that isn't happening anymore. I mean, you obviously didn't do that as part of your site plan approval,
Right.
but without some sort of buffer, there's a default ability, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a condition the board can place to the amount of buffering that's required on that south side.
And as Lee and John said, it's not a problem to amend that landscaping or to incorporate a fence or leave a pedestrian opening.
So from your position, you're as much or as little as the board requires?
We can do it.
Thanks.
Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about the architecture. I know these plans are hard for you to see, but we did have to address flood elevation for the enclosed portion of the building, which is really just the restroom and the admin space. The bulk of that is open and is not subject to that same flood standard. And then this is the tensile welcome structure that would be at the main entrance turnaround. Just a welcome feature. It could provide interpretive orientation information. If there's an event that requires some ticketing, it could be done at that location. That's really what that structure is intended to do. Next slide. We talked about phase one pretty thoroughly, but again, it includes work in all of this area, but the darker shaded area really includes full construction, finished work, amenities, landscaping, lighting, everything that you see there. And then in the north portion of the site, it would include the grading, getting the utilities and the geogrid in place, finishing the site so that it could be used as event space, but not yet doing the pavilion and the walkways and the access drive. Next slide. We are prepared upon site plan approval and the pending agreement with DOT to solicit bids for phase one construction. Those would have to be reviewed. The contractor would have to be selected. There are some, Lee would have to come back before you and others to kind of finalize the selection of that contractor. But we really are looking to try to get that bidding done as quickly as we can so that we can start phase one construction in December and have it complete in the spring so that the site can be reopened and available for use. And that's all. This is, you can't read the schedule, but it basically reiterates what I just said. We've completed the site plans. This is the phase one construction documents, and we're here in September doing these board meetings, getting ready to bid, and then this is construction here December through March.
Does anybody have any further questions?
Is it unfair to ask to hazard a guess when phases 2, 3, and 4? I mean, when the fund rebuilds, have you got any idea of a plan of when the rest comes in play? Or is that a guess?
Well, just based on the line item as it exists right now, and not assuming increase in occupancy, or just kind of keeping things flat, I think it would be, it would be 3 years or so before we could reaccrue the funds for the second phase as it stands right now. But there are other long-term restricted fund line items that when the property was purchased, it's before my time, of course, but from what I understand, those other line items were borrowed against and repaid. That could be a possibility as well. So
if everything stays the same, there's 3 years between phases, roughly.
on phases 1 and 2, yes, but it's important to understand that 70% of the total project cost is in phases 1 and 2. We accelerated, we actually added expense to phase 1 to integrate the bus drop-off, which we felt was just really important to facilitating event use of the site and not, impeding on other properties and that kind of thing.
With the bus drop-off up there on 158, that brings in an issue of movement of handicapped or elderly over potentially half the site to get down there. Is there any?
Well, of course, there's still the primary entrance to the site.
Right.
And otherwise, there are a system of walkways, but, you've either got to be able to bring the bus onto the site or be prepared to get handicapped persons from one place to the other.
Yeah, there's, I understand on the handicap side, a lot of times we get complaints from somebody, man, we've walked forever here, that long trip back to the bus.
It's a big site, and we're hoping that with the system of walkways that it'll improve.
It's better than sand.
Yeah, it'll improve it a lot, and certainly having some lawn out there, more lawn and level will help. Everything that we intend to do will help the usability of the site.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Coon?
Mine's not a question. It's say thank you for the narrative and the slides. They were a great help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else from the applicant, Mr. Nettles? I'll close the public hearing again and send it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do we have a motion to get this on the floor?
So moved.
Move for acceptance as presented.
Yes.
Then a motion to move for acceptance as presented. Or second? Motion dies for lack of a second. I'll make a motion. We'll try this again. I'll make a motion that we approve as presented with the changes that fill be minimized, that the southwest retention drainage area be revised so that water stays on site, that the buffer along the southern boundary be continuous per town code unless shared parking arrangements are negotiated with the town and with Miller's Restaurant, and that the pervious asphalt be removed from the drawings and that be substituted with pervious concrete. Can we get a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Yes.
Mayor, my concern is use of the term minimization, because I think without specifics, staff and the applicant both are going to have a hard time determining what is minimalizing fill.
Well, the idea was to actually minimize just these, well, we can say other than the building site, no fill should be above 8 feet.
Then I'm not saying A or nay, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I think the best direction we can give is clear direction.
Right.
And if you want to be specific, let's make that part of your motion.
All right, well, I will make that part of the motion that all fill areas be 8 feet or below it, except adjacent to the building area where they have to be above base flood elevation. If we can get a friendly second to that one. Okay, now, discussion.
A lot of time has been spent on this site plan. Technical review with the town. It's been before the planning board. They have met all the requirements, including the fill. There are some issues because of the road elevation, as far as the grading to be able to get onto the site with the roadways. If there's a berm or something, I see where that could be adjusted. But to go back and readjust the entire plan at this point will cost a lot of money. It will take significant time. It will delay this quite a bit. And, you know, based on where we were just a few short years ago and going to the public hearings, and, you know, I think it's a pretty remarkable improvement from where we were when we were looking at a conference center or hotel / restaurant / convention center. There are some trees, but having been on other sites where there aren't enough trees and there's no shade, that can be problematic. There is still visibility through the trees on the site. The stormwater has been retained on site. There are also, I don't think it was really pointed out, but I do believe there are stormwater basins up near the road on the south end and just north of the middle turn-in as well. I feel that they have met the requirements, and we're asking this board to go back to the drawing board essentially and kind of start over. And I don't believe it's necessary because I believe that they have met the requirements in working with the town who approved it and working with the planning board who approved it. I just think it's excessive.
The way the motion was made, there really are only minor adjustments. If you look at the drawing, there are only two small areas that would be considered where the elevations have to be adjusted. The drainage area to the southwest there is a matter of adding a small dike, so it would be a matter of just a little bit of effort there. So we really haven't changed that much. The pervious concrete is already included, but it's not included on the drawings, and it should be included before it's approved. And the boundary along the south border is what we require of everybody else. So I was hoping the motion would be fairly well accepting the plans as presented with some very, very minor changes to make it meet our town ordinances, really.
I guess the 8 feet, you know, you've said it a little differently now. Now you're saying specifically where you want them to change it, so.
Well, that's it. That's the only two places above 8 feet. Okay. Any other discussion? Yes.
Looks like to me that we were talking earlier about and this is going to apply to the fill issue, that the road was about 10 feet, and we're trying to even it up a little bit with the road. I can ask a question about a technical aspect, can I not, from a site plan?
I think to answer your question, you're right. There would, if there was a way to give 8 feet, but to be able to, until the transition to the 10 feet of the road.
No, what I'm looking at, I'm just looking at the site plan. That's all I wanted was clarification of what's written. It's not testimony. It's in the document itself. Is looking at it, the elevation of unless I'm totally screwed up and out to lunch, it looks like it's 8 feet or so. It looks like the contours of over 8 feet or more in the areas of, almost looks like
Right.
landscaping areas
And
that are over, but it looks like the roadways
all
are fairly below the 10 feet and don't call for any fill. So
You're
I
right,
don't-
it's the landscaping berms.
It's just the landscaping berms, and there's a reason for that. We're getting we've had a lot of feedback on amount of fill to be put on that site, and there's a reason for that.
I guess what I'm looking at, and that was why I asked my fill question earlier, but I'm not seeing substantial areas of fill.
Right there.
I'm seeing,
There and
Yes.
next to it, and it's turn around there. That's basically all we're talking about, and it's a matter of the impression that we give those people that don't want to see fill on that site.
that's kind of why I asked for specificity, was because I didn't see a whole lot of 10-foot, especially in the drive aisles and so forth.
It's just those two places. Any other discussion? Yes, Mark?
Sir. I have 2 points I'd like to bring up, and I'd like to address them separately in case they turn into motions. One is the conditions from the town engineer, from his review that were in the email and the earlier staffing. I know there was discussion in planning board that those things were going to be able to be accommodated, but I don't know if they have been or not yet on the plans. And if they have not, I'd like to add that as a condition to the motion that the engineer's points be met.
Is Dave here?
David, yes. It's right over there.
The 2 additional conditions are, 1, there's a fire line that runs along this north property line that a 10-foot utility easement be dedicated to that fire line. And then also at the main entrance on the south side, there's an addition of a fire hydrant at that location, and that protective bollarding be provided for that hydrant. Those were the two conditions that were noted in that email.
Okay. John, you want to answer that?
We're fine with that. That's the first time I've heard about an easement up on that fire line up there, because we're putting a hot box to make that part of it actually owned by the event site. The fire line, or the water line that comes down the middle of the site is actually in a 15 or 20-foot easement right now. It was reported years ago when it was put in. So that's all in an easement. I think David also asked for a 30-foot easement over the drainage. No, in your memo, you said something about a 30-foot easement over the drainage pipes too. But if you all want an easement up there for that fire line, that's fine, but we're putting a hot box at the road, similar to like we've done at the YMCA, and at the school, and everywhere else, so that that line would not be a town line. So it actually would be on their responsibility. We'd be happy to take that hot box out and give you the easement.
I guess that raises the question, are we asking for something that we don't need to be asking for?
This was in David's.
No, I think if you look at the email, it references the town code, and the town code requires that a 10-foot utility easement be dedicated for this piece of property.
That after the hot box?
That would be after the hot box, that's correct.
And,
Because we don't want to pay for that hot box.
no,
No, sir.
okay.
So can that be added to the motion? That those conditions be met?
Offer it as an amendment, and we'll be formal with it.
Okay, I'd like to make that as a friendly amendment to the motion, that the
Let's make it as a formal amendment.
formal amendment. Okay.
Motion, make an amendment to the motion to establish it, is that to establish the easement along the north boundary, or to comply with the town engineer's requirements?
The easement and the hydrant, I believe.
The bollard.
All right. So to comply with town engineer's requirements.
Right.
There's a second to that
Second.
motion.
I'll second
Motion
it.
made and seconded.
I want to ask a question on top of it. I think when we left the meeting last time, the very last bullet on David's email, sheet 3.1 describes a future repair area, and you recommended that we have a letter from the county be used in advance of construction. Is that still an open item?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That is still an open item. We have not received an official letter from the health department regarding that.
Marvin, I'll withdraw my second if you'd like to add that to your,
It's one of the town engineering requirements.
the last bullet, the town engineer, the town engineer requirement.
Right, I would like to modify my motion to include that third point.
And I'd like to re-second my
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment?
Are we still in the discussion phase of the site plan?
We're on the discussion phase of the amendment right now. After we get past the amendment, then we'll get into discussion, back to the discussion phase of the site plan. There being no discussion, those in favor of the amendment that the town engineer's requirements be incorporated into the site plan, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, it's so ordered. Now we're back to discussion of the motion as amended.
Looking at the elevations that were presented, again, back on the elevations, John, how much chaos does changing from 10 feet to 8 feet create?
I didn't do the grading plan on this. VHB actually did, but I know Chris probably didn't do the grading plan, and I've looked at it a lot. It appears, as Bob said, that there was just really
Two spots.
a berm here because this was a service drive just to try to give a little bit of blocking, you know, and give a little bit of a dune effect, if you will, so it wasn't just dead flat. And I believe the other section, if we can go, Michelle, can we go down a little bit here? I think the other section occurred right about in here, right, Chris? The highway's at about a 7.5 there.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. The base flood was 10. I'm sorry I said that wrong last time.
Okay, that's what was confusing me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
As I recall from plan review, it's just
But-
those two
but-
spots.
And we looked at it. I think there's actually a little bit of a, I think that bermed up a little bit there too, just to give
Right.
some visual.
That's the other one, right.
Yeah. And we can certainly pull those down to
You can have
back
that
down
done by
flat.
8:30 in the morning.
Hmm?
You can have that done by 8:30 in the morning.
It's just less fill to bring to the site. But yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to be able to tie in here with, because you know how steep it is off of that roadway there and how bad the driveway is to come in and out there. We really need to get that back up to a level playing field. for
I
everybody.
understand that. I was just confused, thinking 10, and we were looking at elevations of 7 and 8.
And that's why,
Okay.
that's why the pavilion was set at like an 8.5.
Okay.
And so that it wasn't too far to get up to the bathrooms, up a
Thank you.
handicap ramp. You're welcome.
Any other discussion of the motion as amended?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, my second point that I wanted to bring up was about the trees. I think we probably have more trees than we need, and I'd rather have fewer if we could to help preserve the view shed there. And what I'd like to do is make a motion to amend your motion to establish a condition that the landscaping architect look to bring the number of trees down to the minimum to meet the town's requirement so that we could expand the view shed.
Is there a second to that amendment? Motion dies for lack of a second. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? If not, all of those in favor of the motion as amended?
I guess I have another question. Sorry.
Oh, he almost did make it under the gun.
Well, I'm just concerned that we're screwing with, pardon my terminology, some of the stormwater plan. And John's shaking his head, no. Okay. I just don't want to get into recalculating and changing.
I hate to complicate things. I don't think 8 is an issue. I think those are the only 2 spots on the plan that are above 8. It would make me feel more comfortable here tonight, not going through every grade on the plan right now. It would make me more comfortable if instead of saying 8, we said grade those 2 spots flat. Just don't berm them up, not to an elevation, just match the grade around them rather than a number.
I went through the plans pretty carefully, and it looks like 8 was, everything else was below 8.
I think you're right. I just,
Mayor, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I would accept that as a friendly amendment if you would make that.
Would your seconder accept it?
I would accept that.
So that becomes, if everybody, if you, both of you accept it, then that becomes the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Well, a reminder that we need to make our conditions of fact as part of what you're doing.
Okay, the conditions of fact that we have to find is that with this motion, the applicant has met the requirements of the town of Nags Head zoning ordinance, subdivision ordinance, and other applicable ordinances. The use will not materially endanger the public health and safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted. The uses proposed will not overburden the firefighting capabilities of the municipal water supply capacity of the town, and that shall be made a portion of the motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. So ordered.
May I make a comment?
Yes, ma'am.
I would really like to thank everyone that, Renee, previous boards that served, for the Tourist Bureau, for all the endless work that has gone into bringing something to fruition here. I think it's going to be a tremendous asset for our community, our overall Outer Banks community, and I think it will be an asset to our Nags Head community. And a lot of people have worked really hard. Staff has worked hard. DHB, Albemarle, Lee, everybody's worked really hard on this, and I think everybody will be pleased in the end. It's going to be a phased process, but it's going to be, I think it's going to be really good. I think the way that it, based on the public input, having the 3 separate venues where you can have multiple activities going on at the same time, or smaller venues for smaller events, makes the site very, very user-friendly, and it will provide beautiful views and access for citizens and visitors alike. So, thank you.
We'd like to join you in those comments. We really want to thank all those who worked on this. You've done a fantastic job. And we started with a bare piece of land, and it's gone through many iterations to get here. And Lee, I know you have worked on it tremendously hard, and engineers have, and town staff has. So it's been a tremendous input, and it's going to be a tremendous project for the town, and a real asset for the entire Outer Banks. And we thank you very much for carrying this forward.
I agree. You can be ready by the October 14th for the Seafood Festival?
That's October 18th.
18th, I'm sorry. Well, you need that setup time there, so.
Mayor, if I might. While we were the reviewing board, this site is not a Nags Head site. It was never intended as a Nags Head site. It's intended as a Dare County site. It's for all the communities of Dare County, and it took a representative of every town. There was only one nay vote on the purchase of the property, and that was because the location was in Nags Head. But we also need to recognize that this idea was supported by all the communities of Dare County, as well as the at-large seats. So it wasn't just a Nags Head project, it's a Dare County project.
Is it appropriate for me to say a quick word of thanks? Just again, to reiterate what everybody has said, the town staff was great for us to work with on this, and we appreciate their help through this process, as well as the planning board. And thanks to the Board of Commissioners as well for your time, for giving us a chance to answer your questions and explain this rather complicated and phased site to you. I do appreciate it. And thanks to the public as well. Both the process of the master plan, but getting here to the site plan has involved a great number of people in the community, and we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is consideration of a zoning ordinance amendment submitted by Butch Stone of OPX Jetpack to amend Town Code Section 4845, commercial outdoor recreational use overlay zoning district to allow new use of jetpack rental. We held a public hearing on September the 3rd. Do we have a motion?
I'm going to make a motion that I'm not sure I can rattle off my conditions. I want to get this on the floor, so let me make a motion to adopt the amendment as presented, just so we can get it out there.
Is there a second?
I mean, the ordinance.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the zoning ordinance amendment as submitted. Any discussion?
Yeah, let me go first, and this may be staff. First off, I actually think after having studied this thing, I actually like the idea of it. But I'm concerned about the way we've written 48-7, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but we've got a jetpack rental tour operator means a business. And then if I go down to about the last thing, the sentence in that paragraph, it says, for purposes of this chapter, a jetpack rental tour operator consists of a jetpack unit and a boat for use by the operator. So I've got two different definitions of what the word jetpack tour means, and it does make some confusion as you read it, but it also tends to mean that a business jetpack operator could not have two jetpack boats. Because the first part says it's a business with no limits, and then the second part says you can only have one jetpack. And so there's some conflicts in the way the language is written. And just moving on from there, and I'm just throwing things out, during Mr. Stone's presentations and all, he's talked about having a spotter boat out there, which is effectively a second jetpack. If the first the first jet ski is the one that's powering the jetpack. That's one. If he's got a spotter boat out there, that's two. Should they come out of the limit of 8? Because you've now put 2 jet skis out there, not just one. And that seems to need to be reconciled. And I'm uncomfortable still with the flight plan dictating, where we're somehow dictating how the sound can be used. And then I'm also going on with that, and that's in section little D12 IV, little Roman 4, says flight plan, and then in the bottom of Roman 5, it says again, the jetpack tour operator shall not operate in sound waters outside the commercial outdoor rec district. Can we actually say that he can, or did we really mean in Nags sound waters in Nags Head outside that district? It's unclear what we restricted him from. And then in 7, we're back to the definition of a jetpack operator, which is doesn't have jetpack, it's just jetpack operator, not jetpack rental/tour operator like everywhere else. And it says the operator must be the owner of the equipment, which again lets it out if the owner of the business, which is the first definition, has 2 jetpacks. He can't operate both at the same time. He could have an employee trained to do so, but the way it's written, somewhat disallows that. And then lastly, what Mr. Stone brought up in public comment, he's saying that 600 feet is too far. If I understood him right, he was saying that 600 feet is too far out. So where did we come up with 600 feet from? So that's my laundry list of things that I looked at. Although I like the concept, I've got holes in everything.
Let Andy's on the podium. Let Andy answer those first.
I'll just go through the intent of the way it was written. You can agree or disagree, but what we were trying to do was previously there wasn't a definition for the use. It was just the word jetpack tour, I believe, and then it went on to list some conditions. What we were trying to do was we were trying to narrow this down to specifically what Mr. Stone said he was doing. So that's the majority of the reason for the specific definition. You know, we tried to define, okay, he said he uses a boat, he uses a circulation hose to circulate water to a pack that's strapped to somebody's back, because, you know, there could be other people that come along that have something, a completely different concept. And I think what the board wanted to try and approve was what Mr. Stone was doing, or consider is what Mr. Stone was doing, and not some other use that we don't know about that may exist out there. So that was the real reason behind the first two sentences. The third sentence was simply to define that, okay, for a jetpack rental tour operator, you are one boat and one jetpack. That is one operation. So if you're on a site and say, you know, there's 8 personal watercraft that are allowed, and we're saying that in order to operate at that site, they could only have 7 personal watercraft, because they'd have to take one away to support the operator, then you can have the one boat and the jetpack, and that's what you can have in addition to those 7 watercraft. That's why we put that in there, so that we're defining what that operation can consist of: one boat and one jetpack.
And then, excuse me, and then if he used a spotter boat, that takes away another automatically.
Yeah, the spotter boat's not included in here.
Right.
So
But if he did, it would be a second jet ski.
Yeah, I mean, that, it would either be that or we would have to address it somehow.
Well, that's why I asked the question.
Okay. Now, the 600 feet, now that came from, that was referencing another section of our code that deals with personal watercraft. You know, we require personal watercraft to go out 600 feet and operate if you're not in the commercial recreation overlay. And there was concerns about water depths, and, you know, we didn't have really good information on water depths. There was also concerns about, you know, mixing with more passive recreation that might occur near the shore, like kayaks, paddle boards. All those people are going to generally be close to shore, so, you know, maybe it makes more sense to have this more intense use go out further and operate out there. So that's where and the 600-foot number came from our rules that already exist that deal with personal watercraft. So that we were trying to keep it consistent with something else that's already in our town code. Let's see, you know, we were basically saying that, you know, we want him to go out 600 feet at a no wake with nobody flying in the air. And then at that point, once he's 600 feet out, then he can start, you know, operating the actual jetpack unit itself. So that was the language there that we put in there. We also referenced the general statutes that deals with personal watercraft. He did include that in his application. I went back and read some of that language, and it's fairly important because that defines how close you can be to other craft, other watercraft. And I know Mr. Stone's well aware of those rules, so that certainly makes us comfortable with that aspect of it. And then there was an issue of just someone being trained to use it. We know Mr. Stone is well aware on how to use it. We're not, you know, we're not sure who might come forward to try and do this if this were adopted. So we wanted to say, you know, what gives the town some surety that the people operating it know what they're doing. So one way to do that is to require the owner to be the operator. You know, we also put something in here about actually going through a training program from the manufacturer. And I think Chief Zork told me that he looked into the JetLev company, which I believe makes the unit Mr. Stone uses, and they actually do have a 3-day training course where they'll certify people to use their equipment. So we didn't want to reference the JetLev company specifically in the language, so we just said manufacturer. And so that was the thought process through all the conditions we included in the ordinance.
Okay, Marvin, you have a question?
Not a question exactly, but along the same lines as Commissioner Ratzenberger's comments. I had marked up this version to try to clarify some of the syntax discrepancies, and I have copies here. If I could pass these out and have one projected, we could talk about that. And if you could pass those down. And then there's one additional paragraph at the bottom. It differentiates between the business, which Andy used the term operation, which is the same term that I'm inserting in there. The business is an operation. The operator is a tour boat operator. And so I've inserted those words in there, in those places where I felt it needed to be clarified. And you might take a minute to go through that to see if I've caught all those types of revisions that would be appropriate. And the last paragraph refers back to a licensing requirement as recommended by Mr. White at our previous public hearing, and also the method of control which Mr. Stone uses, which is that he is totally in control of the propulsion system. It's never transferred to the customer, so that he has control of the propulsion system, which seems to be a much safer and more practical approach. So those would have been my suggestions to revisions to the proposed amendment.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
When we use the term boat, are you using that interchangeable as the jet ski as a boat? Because he was talking about launching from the shore with the jet ski, not a boat. He needs a pier for a boat. So,
I mean, the way this is written, we weren't envisioning the use of a jet ski for this. It would be the boat as he described previously, and then the jetpack unit.
The boat is a jet ski with the pumping water up, correct?
Yes, but it doesn't have a ceiling.
Right, but it's for all intents and purposes a jet ski that pumps water up to the guy.
Right.
And the operator's on the jet ski.
No, I'm normally sitting on the
You're not on the
shore.
tape. No offense, but
Right.
he will not be on the record if he's not at the podium.
I think that's part of the issue is that he described earlier, was that he couldn't operate outside of 600 feet because he's not running a boat, he's standing on the shore. But if you can't operate, according to our town ordinance, if you can't operate outside of 600 feet,
You can't
Then I-
operate.
then you
Then
can't
I
operate.
totally misunderstood the entire 3 September thing, because I thought there was a jet ski with a guy on it driving around, and above him
Could be.
was a jet guy on a jetpack.
What I think you saw some pictures that were shown that is a way to operate a jetpack. But that's not what
I
he
assumed,
proposed.
or I thought I heard, and I could have heard it wrong, that Mr. Stone was the guy on the jet ski with the student up here on the jetpack.
Not his operation. There are operations that do that, but his is effectively a remote control pump.
with a spotter on another jet ski.
Well, I thought the spotter was optional.
So, and
This is entirely confusing.
essentially, for you to approve his use, you're gonna have to allow him to operate inside of 600 feet.
I've got another problem. We're talking about Mr. Stone's operation,
Right, but
and the ordinance that we're talking about is a town-wide ordinance that could have up to eight different operators. And I don't think we have to be careful how we approve an ordinance based on one operation or one proposed operation, rather than looking at how it affects us town-wide. And I think what we have here is based on one proposed operation, and, you know, looking on that line at these operations, most of them are completely different from Mr. Stone's operation. Most of them is just get out there and fly, from the ones that I could see online. So I have that problem with trying to write an ordinance for one specific operation. I think Mr. Stone could probably run his operation, but, and do all right. He's, from what we've heard so far, he doesn't have the permission. If we approve the ordinance, he doesn't have the permission to do it because he hadn't contacted another jet ski operation that's going to drop one of their jet skis. And for this to happen, somebody has got to drop one of their jet skis. because we only gonna have 8 times 8 in the town. So somebody's gotta drop one, and I think it's dangerous to pass an ordinance that's based on entirely aimed at one operation rather than what's good, what can be coming down the road if we pass this ordinance. Yes, Commissioner?
Mayor, thank you. Just a bit about the 600 feet. It was meant as a way to not have jet skis and the noise impact the people that live along the shoreline. We just heard a few weeks ago about Pond Island and so forth. So if we delete the 600 feet, that's moving it closer to Pond Island, and it's moving it closer to Lone Cedar Village. So I would urge the board to be careful about taking away the distances because of the communities that are out there as well. Don't object necessarily to the concept of the jetpack and the recreational opportunities it provides, but I want to make sure that we're consistent in how we treat people. And if we're going to do away with distance, then are we doing away with distance for all jet skis or just for one jetpack with a motor on it that has the same concept? And I'm not saying we are, but I've heard some opposition to the 600 feet, so that's why I'm bringing up what I am. So, otherwise, Andy, I'm fine, but I just want to make sure that we maintain our consistency, and doing it right along the shoreline is not where I envision having this type of operation.
Well, let me throw in here that as I stated, I obviously completely misunderstood something in the 3 September meeting, and I'm not focused on a specific applicant, but just trying to understand how it worked, and I did not pick up on the fact that under this description, the controller was totally separate somewhere else, and so I didn't even understand why 600 foot, made a difference. I mean, I understand 600 feet away, that's a good thing. I mean, it's in all of our code and everything. I didn't understand why that was a problem, because I had a total misconception of the way this thing worked. And so,
Any further discussion? Yes.
Well,
Mayor Pro Tem?
and Marvin didn't get to finish his, but I guess, my concern is the launching from the shore. There is no dock. There's, you're literally launching the operation from the shore, and then you would have to get out to the 600 feet. And based on the videos that I saw, there's a significant amount of propulsion coming down from the water, I guess, and it's pretty shallow water. So given these limitations, given the fact that it's actually 2 vehicles, not one, with the spotter and the vehicle and the jetpack, and launching from the shore as yet to be determined, it causes me concern. So, but
Marvin, on your modification, did you want to make that as an amendment to the motion?
Yes, I would, and I'd like to just amplify a little bit that I think we could pass this text amendment with the rules as we see they're appropriate, 600 feet and operators, et cetera. And if the commercial sector can find a way to operate within our rules, then great, they can come and we can have jetpacks. If they can't, then we just don't have jetpacks. But we have conditions on there that will control their mode of operation to our satisfaction. So I would like to make a motion to amend the original motion to incorporate these word changes and this additional paragraph that's at the end.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Let me ask, yeah, I'm going to second it so I can ask a question.
Okay. Motion been made and seconded. Discussion on the amendment.
You said tour boat operation, whereas we've been using and it's inconsistent between operator and operation.
Operation is the business, operator is the person.
Okay, very good, thank you. That went completely over my head like everything else is. Okay, good.
I have one additional question.
Yes.
The use of the word boat. Because in my head, in what was described in the previous presentation, there was no boat. There is a jet ski and a semi-jet ski-like thing that the hose is connected to. So I didn't hear anything about a boat.
And I think we're describing that pump, and I don't know the right word. We use boat for what is essentially pumping the water back, and the technical term is probably better than boat. There's a word that can be used. I understand.
Okay, it's just my confusion as the definition of the word boat, because that doesn't look like a boat. So-
Well, that's in the
I'll be glad to answer a
No.
lot of these questions if I was up there, because she doesn't want
No,
to talk in here.
No.
Well, just a minute, we will recognize you.
Okay, thank you.
That's actually in the original, the ordinance uses that in A12. It's got the word tour boat rental / tour boat. So that started from there, I guess.
Mr. Stone, would you like to come to the podium and do some clarification?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just a minute.
I have a question of the attorney. Does this represent a substantial change?
That's not an easy question to answer. It's,
Say yes.
the easy advice is if you think it might, then it's better to go through the process again.
And the fact of the matter is, unless you change the 600 feet, you haven't done what the applicant needs you to do. You haven't changed, don't have a text amendment that he's requesting to allow him to operate. So if the point is to get him to operate, then I think staff and the applicant should go back and present something to you that does meet his intent. Otherwise, you're approving something for someone that hasn't come before you to ask for.
All right, Mr. Stone, you want to give us some clarification? You've heard the concerns.
Okay. Normally in Manio, the town of Manio, I have a 32-foot pontoon boat that I set on, that I bring the people on the boat. They sit there and I teach them how to fly it. They go down in the water. I have a remote control. I watch them go around the boat, back and forth and so on. No problem. Okay, I've got enough water to do that. We come out there on a jet ski. We bring them out from the shore to the boat on a jet ski. They can come out to the boat once they get there. Then I teach them how to do all this from the boat itself. Okay. What I mostly wanted was the Wounded Warriors to come here.
Wait a minute. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I got to interrupt this because it's,
Any
I want to go
questions?
back to try and square away the terminology.
Let's finish up here just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't need to hear about wounded.
Yeah, we don't, that's not part of it. That's not my
We
issue.
just want the clarification. You said you had some clarifications. We want the clarification.
Okay. Well, the main thing I want here is I wanted to be able to fly people right there just for the Wounded Warriors, right at Nags Head Waterworks, across from Bass Nights, because you could walk off the beach. It's nice and deep right there in that one spot. If I go out 600 feet, I don't know, but I don't think it's over like 2 or 3, 4 feet deep. Right there at that one spot, it's like 10 feet deep going into the channel, and it's like 6 feet deep around by the road and so on. I mean, I could work off the shore right there and teach you Wounded Warriors while they're following around with the jet ski. Normally, we do have a jet ski in the water just to be out there in case the people need something, like if they're tired. We just, we'll bring them back in and so on. And that's what the jet ski is for. It's just there in case they need
So
something.
you do have a propulsion unit, and you do have a jet ski.
And I do have a
out there.
jet ski
So we
just
are
to
talking-
follow them.
So we are talking
Yeah,
two
just to
units,
follow them
right.
around
Right.
and make sure that they're okay. If they need anything, if they have trouble starting it or whatever, we can go over and, you know, help them start it and so on.
Where is the pump?
The pump is, I call it a pod, and it's like a jet ski, but it's not. And it's out in the water with the hose hooked to it, with them hooked to it. I wish y'all would come over to Manio.
No,
and show you.
I understand that, because I asked last time, there's nothing powered on the rider.
No,
So I thought this pump is really like a jet ski.
right, and it
But it
pumps
can
the
travel
water.
around. Does it have an operator on it?
No,
No.
I have a remote control for that.
So that's why there's no operator.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Stone?
I just have one.
Yes.
There would be no pontoon boat at this location.
It doesn't have to be, right. I mean, I could have it anchored out just a little bit and just be
But
able
was
to
that
work
your
it there.
intent?
I can, yes. I would have it out there. I mean, I could run off the shore. I can do it either way. I can stand on the shore, and as long as they're not too far, like this would work at that particular one, I could stand on the shore and drive this thing without any problem. Or I could have my pontoon boat out a little bit further and just drive it, you know, have them right there. I can do it either way.
All right, Commissioner Moon. Thank you,
Mayor.
Mr. Stone. Get you to have a seat, please.
I appreciate all the questions and all the discussions, but I will not be able to support any of the motions that have been offered this evening on this.
Right.
It has gotten very site-specific, and any ordinance we do applies to everyone, not just one. And I have not heard anything at this point this evening except to confuse me further about how it works.
We've got an amendment to the motion on the floor. Any further discussion of that amendment? If not, all of those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
Nay.
Nay. Amendment fails. Any further discussion of the motion? The motion would be to accept the ordinance change as presented. No further discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All opposed to the motion signify by saying nay.
Hey.
Nay.
Motion fails.
Now we get to do
Next item on the agenda is the consideration of the beach tent.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor? As we did last month, there needs to be a consistency statement motion for the action, even though it is a denial. I can,
Would you read that out, please?
yes, Mr. Mayor, if I can get my email back up here. Someone would want to make a motion to adopt a statement that the board's action to deny the application for the text amendment proposed was consistent with the town's land use plan and any other officially adopted plan that is applicable, and the action was reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons stated by the various commissioners during the discussion of the motions this evening.
Also moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. The motion that the motion for denial be approved
Findings of fact.
and with findings of fact as stated. All those in favor signify by saying aye. This is
Aye.
for a motion for denial. No opposed? And so ordered. Next item on the agenda is a consideration of the beach tent ordinance.
What you have before you is ordinance that would regulate or prohibit unattended personal items from being left on the beach overnight. a policy as well as a draft of what tent tags, what it would look like, if what we would tag the tents with, be it if you went the ordinance route or the policy route. And I want to just say up front that if this is action the board wants to take, if the policy isn't going to give us the ability to enforce, the ordinance does. So I think feel pretty strongly that we need to, if this is something the board wishes to do, it needs to be by ordinance form. And hearing what you said at your last meeting, we've taken out some of the more restrictive parts of this ordinance. And I'll go straight, Michelle, to the third page of the ordinance. This would amend Town Code Section 8. It would add 8.8. The first part that's been amended is the language taken out unlawful. You may have read that, part of this ordinance is that people could face imprisonment. We very clearly are not going to arrest anyone who leaves their tent on the beach. The word unlawful is just not visitor friendly, so we've just changed that from prohibited. It's just you're trying to prohibit the use of tents left on the beach overnight, as well as personal items. Also heard that 6 o'clock was too early, so we've amended this that they are prohibited to be unattended between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Again, using a little friendlier language of prohibited instead of unlawful. In the remedies, we've added this to section 16B. We've made it a misdemeanor, as other parts of chapter 8 are also listed there. It's any violation of any provision of the following chapters and sections of this code shall be a misdemeanor and punishable as provided by the general statutes 14.4. So we've included that and taken it out of criminal. Under there also, the way we would enforce this would be that all tents that were collected would be stored at Public Works, left there until Monday. We would dispose of them on Monday, with the idea being that the owner would probably be back home, didn't want the tent. The process of having storage fees just adds another administrative layer to the town that, quite frankly, we just don't need to collect the $25. It's just more trouble than it's worth. Disposal is simply, as I said, there are no continuing offenses. We've stricken that. And again, civil and criminal penalties, we've excluded that for littering. It still gives the town manager the ability to grant exceptions. Underneath, again, part 2, it's the use of the word prohibited. And let's see, under there also, we've just some formatting changes. We took out the part about the age restrictions. You're prohibited from leaving a hole on the beach, regardless of age. And then the other part, we've stricken the part where we've added the criminal and civil either or. It's just all part of the misdemeanor. It's not criminal to leave your tent on the beach. We've taken that part out. What we've heard, we went to the property managers to try and get some feedback and information from them. They are willing to have staff come and present to them what our intent and how we would enforce this and how we would go about getting compliance. They agreed that there should be an opportunity for the owner to get it back. We've provided for that. They felt like the hours that we've now presented to you are better, more appropriate. And clearly like the idea of a year of education first, where we do all that we possibly can to get the word out, the leave only footprints behind slogan, kind of, it's the message that's sent. The way staff would go about administering this, if the board is agreeable that and understands that if you were to adopt this ordinance, that we would still have tents on the beach. This wouldn't overnight rid the beach of these tents unless we were to hire manpower but the board doesn't want, I clearly heard the board is not interested in doing that. We would tag them the first part of the week. We would go back out the next day if they're still tagged. If they're still there, if they haven't been removed, we would remove them. We'd take them to Public Works. They would be there until the following Monday, and then we would dispose of them. But again, we would, and what we've heard from the other towns is that compliance comes, it takes time, but people will get the message. But this ordinance would give us the ability to get the tents a little more aggressively, those that were obviously going to become trash, or those that may have been left, those that were impeding public safety, those that kept us from being able to get up and down the beach. So hopefully we've included or amended it such that in favor of the board's direction.
Thank you, Cliff. I think staff has done a good job of incorporating our discussions from last time, and I'll make a motion that we adopt this amendment to our town ordinances as presented. Wait for a second so we can start discussion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, one is just administratively, the bottom whereas on the first page, we've shifted from little i's to the Roman numerals halfway through it. And the same thing with the big whereas on the second page. 1, 2, 3. The fourth whereas on the second page, we've done the same thing. So just, for neatness sake, let's do I's or numbers. And then I'd like to add, at this point, I'd like to offer an amendment to yours in that in Part 1, Bowlegs B1, that was unreasonably restricts, prevents, disrupts the passage of public works, emergency, or ocean vehicles, or passage of the public. I'd like to... Passage of the public, and I'd like to add that same thing in Part 2, Bowlegs A3. And the reason I add that is it kind of gets over my concerns about if we do get somebody chaining 9 tents together or something like that, or...
You've got the amendment on the floor.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is there a second to that amendment?
May I ask a question? Did you say or passage of the public?
Well, it's a list. Add a comma somewhere. It says unreasonably restricts, prevents, or disrupts the passage of public works, emergency, comma, ocean rescue vehicles, or the public. In other words, make a real sentence out of that, to the list.
All right, is there a second to that motion? A second to the amendment?
Second.
Okay. In discussion of the amendment?
I just think this covers some of the cluttering issues and clustering issues without getting into specifics.
All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Discussion of the motion as amended. If not, all those in favor of the motion as amended.
One thing, because before we even start doing anything, there's a comment here under the finance officer that we need to acknowledge in doing this, the implementation that if we're going to start tagging this in May, that's this fiscal year, and we haven't funded the tagger. And it will also be required during this budget year to think about the enforcer for the following year. So we need to just be aware of it.
Doesn't require any changes to the motion.
No, it doesn't require changes, but it is significant.
All those in favor of the motion as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. And there being none, so ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Ben, do you have anything for us tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd spoken with Mr. Ogburn about this previously, but I'd like to have a hopefully brief closed session with regard to the Cherry Inc. matter at the end of the meeting.
Okay, we'll do that at the end of the meeting then. Items referred to, presentation from the town manager. Anything tonight from the town manager?
No, sir.
Mr. Ratzenberger, you have a resolution for us tonight?
Yes, I do. Last, in September, I showed you that the letter that the ARPO had sent to DOT about the next time we go through the stop process. And they sent a letter and they were asking people to endorse by resolution so we, get it in. And so what I've done is I've presented a resolution that basically endorses the ARPO's letter to DOT about changes to the process. Many of these that I've discussed here before. And so I'm asking the board.
You make a motion for?
I'd like to make a motion that the
adoption of
board
the resolution.
adopt this resolution.
There's a second to that motion.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to adopt the resolution as presented by Commissioner Ratzenberger to ARPO. Any discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, so ordered.
Well, I've got the floor on ARPO, if you don't mind.
Got one additional item?
Yeah, well, I give you one. I can give you two. So in a crowded day in the inbox, I got a letter from DOT about, and I'll talk more about this in October, but they're going to review. If you remember, I put that chart up about the state strategic plan, and they dropped like 158 and a bunch of other roads off being strategic and, our EVAC and everything else. They're going to have a review period in October, and by that time, I hope I can, digest some of this and bring it back in the October board. The other thing that hit is the NC DOT 25-year vision slideshow popped up in my inbox. And this is why all this is happening. And all I've had time to do is gather that they've designated a coastal region, and things that are important to them are sustainable beach nourishment, improve highway connections, replace aging bridges, stabilize inputs, and transform North Carolina ports. And this goes in with some of the conversations we've been having offline about fracking, natural gas, and everything else. Doesn't mention that, but there's again the push on building Morehead City. And then in the eastern region, which is our neighbors right, to the west of us, the important items are improve the highway to Hampton Roads. This is the thing I talked about the highway coming down 6417 out of Hampton Roads and cutting in and then ultimately heading down into Morehead City for things. Strengthen military connections, which of course ties them in down around Lejeune and Jacksonville now. Enhance freight movement, which is to improve I-70 to interstate standards, and US 70 to interstate standards for freight movement in this, and that's kind of talked about this idea of distribution centers happening out there. And improve I-95 connections to rails and seaports. So this is all in their plan. And additionally, and I don't think I brought it with me, we have received some grant, $5 or $6 million, to enhance a section of rail up in Bertie, Northampton, and Hertford counties that serves the Sucor iron plant. So they're happy about that. So that's, and I have more about that when we get to October. I could talk about the shore milling management, but I think,
We'll do that later.
yeah.
I'll cover the meeting that we had with the,
Mayor, are we going to have a Board of Commissioners agenda? Are we going to have a Board of Commissioners agenda?
yeah, Dora, yeah, you have something tonight.
Only one. I'd like to point out that the town lost a public servant last week. And on behalf of the board, I'm going to express to the O'Malley family how much we care. Doug gave a lot of his life to the town. And he will be missed.
I think we all reflect your comments there. Certainly was a loss to the town, a loss to the entire county. And I think we'll take it up at a later time on what we need to do. Any other commissioners' reports? I'm going to defer our comments on our meeting will be wide to our October meeting due to the hour. Any other business we need to bring before the board tonight before we go into closed session? If not,
You'd want to make a motion to go into closed session.
motion to go into closed session under the
NCGS 143-318-11A3 to confer with an attorney retained by the town on the town of Nags Head v. Cherry Inc. litigation.
closed session. Board's back in open session. Gallup?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In closed session, the Board of Commissioners and the attorney discussed the Cherry Inc. litigation, and the Board of Commissioners provided direction to the town attorneys on how to proceed with that litigation at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other business tonight? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second to that motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. There being none, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Staff want all these things back